So, hi everyone. Bonjour. My name is Sébastien. I'm going to talk about my project today called Invisible Islands. But before, a little bit of background. So I grew up in a small village in France of about 1,200 inhabitants near the German border. My father would often fly to America. He was a telecom engineer. And one day, he came back from Berkeley, California, with a pack of 200 floppy disks without any label. At the time, I spent a lot of days looking at each disk and exploring their content. So each disk was a mystery. I never knew what I would find on them. And even though I was living in a small French village, I felt I had access to a whole new world. So in the mid-90s, my family finally had an internet access. And there, I rediscovered this sense of freedom of wonder I had exploring these hundreds of floppy disks. But I feel that since then, things have changed a little bit. We can see that we have services, centralized services that act as centralized entry points and challenge the decentralization of the network on which the internet was built. We have governments abusing the internet for mass surveillance. And we have citizens putting their life on trial for doing their duty. So, as a citizen, I started to get worried. But as an engineer, I felt I could start to make something and change. From my own experience, I believed in the power of communities through open source, open data, and hacktivism. I was inspired by others, such as the critical engineering movement, which is about questioning our dependency on technology, deconstructing the technology, learning, and understanding. One of the projects that really resonated with me, you might know about him, Aram Bartol. So it's dead drops. It's a simple USB key that are put into the concrete. You don't really know what's in there. There's an aspect of mystery, and it's also anchored physically in the physical space. I really like this notion. Another piece that really resonated with me was Julian Oliver's transparency grenade. So the way it works, it's a device that you trigger like a grenade. You put it somewhere near a room full of corporate executives, and it records all the traffic, like Wi-Fi traffic and audio traffic. And then you can retrieve it later and analyze like the signals that you recorded. And I think like even the shape of the objects really shows this notion of activism and warfare, and that information is powerful and something that's like can trigger wars. I think something that's local, or used to be local, 5 Points, so a center for graffiti and street art. So what I really like about street art is not necessarily the aesthetics, which I do like, but more the notion of using the city as a canvas. This is our space, and we claim our right to use it as a medium of expression. Yeah, I know, and I'll come to that later. So something that makes mass surveillance possible on the internet is the fact that it's very convenient. You can access information anywhere. Like if you're in Sweden, you can have information that is hosted in South America. It's not going to be an issue. But it enables mass surveillance. So what if, unlike on the internet, information is only accessible locally? And how could this help preserve our freedom of sharing and our freedom of communication? And how would that affect the local communities? So that's the questions I started to explore in the project called Invisible Islands. So it's part of the OffNet family, which is a set of projects including Piratebox. So OffNet stands for Offline Network. So the Invisible Islands leverage inexpensive hardware and open source software, so namely Raspberry Pi and then Linux. to create information islands where information is only accessible locally. So the devices create a data overlay that is anchored in a physical space. And the space is both open and private. So the content is encrypted and stored anonymously on the device. There is no tracking, no logging. There is no index, no search engine. But instead, content is advertised through codes that are displayed physically in the nearby environment. So you use your mobile device to connect and access and decode the information cells, so using the codes advertised. And anyone is free to upload new content without any kind of censorship or moderation. Once you upload the content, you cannot remove it. So the content is only accessible within a delimited physical space, making the information island naturally sheltered from network-wide scrutiny. So each island is a blank canvas. It's a new medium creating a digital overlay in the urban space. And the first iteration of the project took place during a residency in Aarhus in Denmark last year, where I focused mainly on developing the technology and a little bit of the conceptual framework. So I'm a software engineer, but I didn't want to do something that was purely technology focused. I wanted to have some correlation to art and activism. So I started sketching out some concepts of how that would look like. At the beginning, I thought I would use QR codes instead of numerical codes. As we saw this morning, there are some difficulties. But I thought it was the least problematic option. Then you use your QR code scanning app to decode the content. Another big mistake. And then you advertise your content through stickers, but you need a printer if you're using QR codes. So I had the basic building blocks, and so I needed to explain to other people what you could do, because of course QR codes content is a little bit abstract. So the first use case that came to mind was the notion of architectural walkthrough. So imagine you're a tourist, you're in a city, you don't have a data plan or it's just too expensive, and you want to walk through historic places and learn about whatever is interesting. So you could use the islands to create a local network of places to visit. No data plan required, of course, and you don't have to bother about internet connectivity because it's disconnected. So you could use QR codes on stickers. There's an element of branding and signage, so you just look for the round QR codes, maybe use a flashy pink or yellow color, and people can see them from a distance. Then they decode the content, connect to the island, and access the content. You can even build on that and create some element of gamification where, depending on the number of QR codes you have decoded, some new content could be unlocked. So you can have a real-life game. So coming back to the comment regarding 5 points, the second use case is street art history. So street art is inherently ephemeral. The graffiti will be painted over or simply whitewashed by the city. And even the buildings get destroyed sometimes. So there's a need to archive this content. Specifically, if you are in a place, maybe there is a graffiti that you liked, and then if you have an island installed nearby, you can capture the graffiti as a photo, attach it to a QR code that is a sticker, so even if it gets removed, you can put it back and people can see what used to be there. You can also do pop-up museums, you have graffiti, and you can have the artist's biography or description of the piece next to the QR code. It's anonymous, so you don't care about the cops. And because I'm from Montreal, and you might have heard that we had a mayor that had to go back home because of corruption claims, and the interim mayor had to do the same a few months afterwards. It's, yeah, that's Quebec. So So I was also thinking of ways to encourage public servants to leak information to the public, and they probably don't know how to use Tor. They might be afraid of handing a USB key in person. So why not reuse existing QR codes to leak information? So you install an island or you carry it in your backpack, and someone takes a picture of the QR code. You might think this person wants to buy this pair of jeans, but instead he's uploading like a contract that shows corruption at the city level. And then the journalist can do just the same after that. So of course, the anonymous aspect is critical here. But really, QR codes suck. That's the definitive answer I had from this first experience. The first reason is that people don't know how to decode them. Even if you have the app, probably doesn't work. It doesn't work especially in low light situation, or if you have a little bit of texture and it's not uniform. And I think the final blow was that you cannot draw them by hand, or it takes forever. So that's the first version of the devices. So pretty simple. Some tape to make it a little bit waterproof, just a little bit. And so that's Aarhus, or part of it. And so I deployed 3 of the islands at different locations, and the selection of the location was important. So the first location is a park called Moleparken. I don't speak Danish. It's a large open space with trees, and you can see some benches. There is a river flowing by. And it's a place where many people living in Aarhus would cross once a day or maybe once a week. So there is a lot of traffic from a variety of people. Interestingly enough, at the time when I was there were some busts of famous Danish writers, and there were some QR codes, but sadly I couldn't decode the content because I had no data plan, and the city Wi-Fi required registration. And then later on they disappeared, the QR codes. The second venue was Foxhole, which is not too far from the park. The park is here, so it's there. It's a music venue, so it's mostly active at night. So you have a younger crowd. It's also a little bit secluded. Like you have a nice area here where you have benches and a little bar. So that was a very different community, and also more active by night. And the third location, it's called God's Bannen. You might have heard about it. It's a very interesting initiative. It's a citizen playground, so a kind of huge hacker makerspace with a strong incentive to be creative and do cross-disciplinary work. So it was ideal for deploying the islands. So it looks like that. It's a former train station, and you have big areas like a volleyball center. You have these big containers that you see throughout the city. It's part of this Use initiative, which encourages people and citizens to be creative. Some interesting signage, and the inside of one of the makerspace. So each of these spaces had different qualities and also different communities. So the big question that I had at the time is who are going to use the islands, and what kind of content and use cases we will see emerge from them. But my stay in Aarhus ended just a few days after I installed the islands. So I was really curious to learn about what happened in the meantime. So Peter, who helped me do the installation, organized a workshop a couple of weeks later. So people started to write post-it notes and try to see how the platform could be used. And they brainstormed and come up with a few concepts. So if there is any native Danish speaker in the room, let me know so that I can understand what they came up with. But there is someone here, Rasmus, who did something that was really large scale. And quite the best possible outcome I could have expected from this first phase. So Rasmus created a game situated in a Danish forest. So he's a scout, he's a scout. So young scouts will have to navigate their surroundings, hunting for QR codes, and getting directions based on the content of the QR codes. So the game allowed to make decisions, so depending on which one you would pick, the directions will be different. So the story unfolded as players would progress through the forest. And each person also would have a unique experience based on the decisions they had made. So even more interesting, some of the islands were carried on backpacks, so the structure of the network was evolving in real time. And I think that was a great validation of the platform and an amazing example of using this digital overlay in a site-specific manner and taking advantage of the fact that in the forest you traditionally don't have data coverage. But I really was left with one big question, like what about the narratives? What kind of stories, location-specific stories would you create on such a platform? So comes the next iteration of the project, which I just finished installing in Montreal back in October. It was targeted to a more general audience. We had some partners, the NFB, Quartier des Spectacles, and Mutech. And I was lucky enough to work with Daniel Conti. He's a Canadian author, and he accepted to join me on this experience of exploring location-based narratives. So, because of the partners, we had to install the project in the Quartier des Spectacles, so that's Sainte-Catherine Street for those who know Montreal. It's a big avenue, and the area is about like a few square miles. And it's really the center of arts and concerts in Montreal. So this neighborhood has a long and rich and complex history. It used to be the red light district, but now it's the center of arts and businesses as well. So instead of always doing the same walk, like most of the people would just walk on Sainte-Catherine, we wanted to do a walkthrough where you would rediscover a neighborhood that you might come often to, but some places that you probably don't go every day. So we wanted the people to experience the city differently and also learn about its history and make them think about like what it was and what it is becoming. We had a few challenges ahead. The first challenge is the islands, the Raspberry PIs, but they still need power. They cannot sustain on batteries alone, sadly. The second one is, of course, like QR codes. It's a real barrier, so if you're targeting a general audience, that's not an option. And also, what about participation? Like so far, we had people creating content, but we didn't really know how like a general audience would use the platform to share their thoughts. So Daniel made a super good suggestion early on. He said, don't use QR codes, use numerical codes, and that was such a big relief because it's super easy to write numbers. Everyone knows them. So it lowered the barrier of access. So then we proceed to exploring location-based narratives. So we started with the idea of text fragments spread out at different locations. And we wanted the fragments to be readable out of order so that you can start anywhere and you don't have to go in one direction, so it's not too linear. And also importantly, to preserve this gaming element, that the more fragments you collect, the more you understand a broader story. So in practice, fragment would help you decode like one big letter that concludes the experience. Some of the fragments would prompt you to act. So for instance, you arrive at a location, you decode the content, and then you're invited to share your thoughts and upload them on the local island. So we ticked our boxes in terms of like what we wanted to do, out of order narration, relation between the content and the location, and a physical and digital experience. That's the very first version of the box. Then I started to experiment with 3D printing with more or less success. But then I understood how it worked, and I ended up doing this weatherproof box that worked well. So the actual project starts at the Saint-Laurent station, which is a station, metro station in Quartier des Spectacles. So you have this big panel that tells you basically you take your mobile phone, you connect to the network Île Invisible, that's French for Invisible Islands. Then you go to ilinvisible.ca and you read the instructions. So it's relatively simple and boarding. We try to minimize the barrier of access. You can see there are some signage around. It's because we spray painted on sidewalks like arrows to help navigate. So the physical aspect was important to have this digital physical connection. That's acrylic paint. You can remove it easily. And we created like a visual language, a little bit intriguing to indicate the sites where you have content. So here you have a site, you have a piece of content, and there you can see an arrow pointing to the next site. So the goal was to have a signage that would be embedded within the city, visible but not too visible. And also to take you to interesting places where you might not go, or you might be afraid to go, but that still have, like, show you an interesting facet of the city. So as you see, we try to embed this language within the existing spray painting on the ground in the city, so that it will be there will be some kind of camouflage. And that's a screenshot of the interface. So if you decoded like 1955, then you'd be, or 1964, then you'd be reading this. It's in French only, so sorry about that. So we 3D printed the letters to have nice typography for the numbers, and that's the stencils we used for the sites. So overall, we had 70 different text fragments, so Daniel worked quite intensively on that. 16 different locations, 3.7 kilometers, and 1 island. What happened? Yeah, because we wanted to have 1 island at least per site, so between 10 to 16 islands. At the end of the day, we had just one initially at the Saint-Laurent station, where on the first connection, the user will be inoculated with an offline application having all the content. And I'll tell you why that is. So the first reason is that finding places in public space with electricity is really hard, but we knew that it was one of the first challenge we knew we would have to overcome. So back in Denmark, it was easy. Peter managed to find, like, he knew everyone, so it was super easy to plug the devices, so just ask people, and we had only 3. So the Quartier des Spectacles, they offered to install the islands on these blocks, les blocs Morelli, and they have access to power, but we had only 3 of them, and so 3 locations out of 16, not enough. So for the 13 locations left, we're on our own. The Quartier des Spectacles said, we don't have the resources to negotiate, you have to contact everyone directly. But we are too busy working on the design and technical aspects, so we basically couldn't do that. So first lesson, make sure you have electricity from the get-go, unless you do like Aram, and you have a fire-powered router that's hidden in a rock. So also I mentioned that, but we created a visual language that would blend in the city existing markings. And so the Quartier des Spectacles managed to have an agreement with the city, but we were only allowed 50 markings, only on the sidewalks, and stuff like that. Tape was not allowed, even though you can remove it easily. So we had to work with even more constraints. So ironically, one of the locations we had selected was Place des Arts, so the place of arts, and it's the only place where we weren't allowed to do any marking on the ground. So I guess it's just the official art, not the citizen art. So if you want to use your city as a canvas, you'd better do it guerrilla style. Don't ask anyone, just do it. At least in Montreal, that's how it works. And the last element is that participation is a key element of the islands, because it's a medium that's that's open by design to everyone. So we wanted to give chalk to people at the Saint Laurent station so that they could write their content number on the walls or on the ground or wherever. But the partners, the NFB and Quartier du Spectacle said, did you think about moderation? And to that I answered, moderation is a non-goal for the islands. It's the participation aspect is key. And so they said, no, you cannot put chalk, and that's how the participation aspect got axed. But the feature was there, it's just it's not advertised. So it raised the question of freedom of expression in public space and highlighting the practical limits of that. So one of the other lessons I took from this second iteration is that public expression in public space is highly regulated and also highly tacitly regulated because none of these decisions that prevent us to do what we wanted to do were based on law or regulation. It was tacit regulation. So the next part of the project and like the kind of extension of that, because it's an ongoing experiment, it's the tension between citizen and institutions that we've seen before. Information is power, and networks and digital spaces are critical points of tension. So like, that's something to think about and to act upon. I really like off-nets, and I think it's a very interesting emerging field. They elude institutional or corporate control because they're super easy to install, super easy to manage. They don't need internet connection, and they can run on battery for a few hours. So they offer a unique use cases, and I think we're just starting to discover what we can do with them. Something that I'm personally very interested in is the notion of locative art. So to basically overlay a digital layer somewhere and create something out of it. I think William Gibson talks about augmented reality sculptures installed at specific places in one of his books. So that's something that's to be explored. So something that is still an open question to me is how do you manage participation and sharing? How do you encourage people to share? How do you educate them about the type of content they could create? What are the conceptual and technological barriers? So I'm working on a workshop that I'm going to do in a couple of weeks in Liverpool with a kind of a deck of cards with actions and like keywords to help people frame a storytelling and see what works. So I'll let you know in a couple of weeks whether that was a success or not. And I think because we're in America, practical applications, that's the $1,000,000 question. I guess people will soon see startups using off-nets and that kind of thing in practical application. But that's still something that is pretty much research and art, like the domain of research and art so far. So thanks a lot. Merci beaucoup. That's my Twitter handle, the slightly updated website for the project, my personal website. And if you're interested in off-nets, that's where you should be. Any questions?
I'm mostly interested in the power problem. Like, do you have any ideas of like where is it getting better? Like, we need lower power devices and better ways to power them. Like, is there any like prototypes or research in that direction?
Yeah. So there is one working system that involves car batteries, like the big and big solar panels. So I think like the challenge would be in finding a form factor that works in the city, because you have to conceal them. If you like, you're probably not going to.
Just like a car battery on the sidewalk.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something. The other option maybe would be to have a more integrated circuit. So something that's maybe Arduino based instead of Raspberry Pi based, and then defer most of the processing on the client side, because encryption happens on the Raspberry Pi right now, which is bad from a security standpoint, but that's just how it is right now. So that's another avenue. Yeah, maybe bigger batteries. I don't know, like, I'm sure it will improve over time, but yeah, it's a major issue. Yeah. Yeah.
So did you have multiple Raspberry Pis broadcasting their own Wi-Fi networks, and then that's where the code, like people would see the code and say, let me look for that Wi-Fi network, or was there one Wi-Fi network that everyone was consistently logged into across multiple Raspberry Pis?
Yeah, so in theory, what we would have liked is to have multiple Raspberry Pis having the same Wi-Fi network, so broadcast on the same channel, same SSID, so that whenever you come close to an island, then you automatically connect to it. But because of the problems I mentioned, we only could install one island. So instead, what I did is an offline HTML app. So when you connect to the island, then you're redirected through the captive portal to the website. Then you get all the content. And then you can decode whether you're connected or not. Because the content is stored locally, but you still need the code to decrypt it. Another question? Okay, but thanks a lot for your attention.